Welcome to Virtual for Real, the Rapid Pipeline podcast. I'm Max, your host, and with me today is Tobias Nientiedt. Toby, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you here. Super excited.
Hi, Max.
I don't know how to introduce you properly. I would just say Toby's an amazing 3D and CGI generalist.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to hear your learnings from many years of 3D digital twins and working with CGI at various companies, big companies, and also studios, and just like discussing about 3D digital twins and AI and the future of that. So maybe we can start with a quick introduction. How did your 3D journey start, Toby, and how did it develop?
I studied communication and media design back in the days in Dortmund, and there I've been in touch with CGI for the first time in one of our courses and was fascinated by the technology because I was able to generate images without the need of having a camera, a location. I'm independent of weather and so on. And that was super fascinating for me. And from that point on, I dove deeper into that technology and used it all the time within in the beginning of my career when I was working as an art director in different advertising agencies just to visualize my ideas. But then I recognized within that journey that I had a lot of fun with creating those images, and then went more and more into the direction of producing not only the visualization of the ideas but also the final content.
Yeah, amazing. And that brought you to working with various companies in different sectors. So I remember like we met when you were at Otto back then. And for the
Exactly.
people who don't know Otto, this was one of the biggest, now online businesses in Germany. Back then it was a catalog where you could order things. So they needed really good visuals so that people could understand what they order. But I think the journey leads even way back. Yeah, maybe
Exactly.
tell us a little
I
bit
mean,
about that.
as I said, I started in advertising, and then Otto knocked on my door and asked because I have founded a CGI agency at Scholz and Friends within the Scholz and Friends network in the beginning for Opel, but then we also worked for different other clients. And then Otto asked me if I would like to do the same within Otto for the home and living department. And sounds very interesting for me, moving from advertising to the other side of the table. And it has been an amazing time. I was 6 years over there, was responsible for leveraging CGI for product imageries, for the PDP, the product detail page. And that was interesting because at that time, Otto was on their journey from from a retailer to becoming a platform so that also other retailers were able to sell their products on that platform. And with that, we were able to also to found a production service so that other platform retailers were able to produce content through Otto's pipeline for the Otto platform. And that was like a complete different part of the process and of the industry, right? There, in the first place, at Otto, we were only responsible for creating content for our own needs. And you needed other workflows, other colleagues, other skills to really implement those kind of services. A very interesting time.
Yeah, that's actually quite exciting because I know of similar cases like when you have, let's say, retailers like in the US, Target or so, right? Target has a house brand, the Target brand, right? You can buy stuff that is made by Target for the Target stores, but then you can also buy a lot of other articles from other brands, right? And all these national brands from the US that sell through Target. And I think it's similar with Otto, right? Let's say, I don't know, sofas or so that are made by Otto, but you can also buy other articles
Exactly.
from other brands, right? Through the Otto platform. And so
And
you
I
need to
mean,
standardize CGI basically, ideally.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's always those platform ecosystems, right? The idea is to have multiple services for retailers on that platform, to support them selling their products. And one of them was the CGI production service.
Great. And then I noticed like you went to 747, which is a studio, right, and worked on virtual photography. And now you're at Accenture. Yeah, how did that work? What are your activities nowadays?
Yeah. When I left Otto, I have never worked in a smaller companies. like Ogilvy and Mather, Leo Burnett, Scholz and Friends, Otto, all of them were quite large companies, and I wanted to see how it is to work in a kind of smaller company and in a different kind of environment. And the 747 Studios has been one of the CGI vendors for Otto, and I've been in close contact with them even before I went to Otto. I've been in contact with them already when I was working at Scholz and Friends, and they have a very nice spirit within that studio. So the working together is, it's different there. And then Christian, the founder, asked me if I would love to join the 747 Studios to, on the one hand, help them scale the digital production department, but also help them to digitize the entire studio and processes and workflows and so on. And then back in the days, AI came into place. And then, of course, it was also my responsibility to integrate AI workflows into existing production workflows. And that was super interesting. But at the same time, I recognized when you're working in a smaller studio, you have multiple jobs on your table that probably are not like in the super focus of your expertise. And then I recognized that this is probably not what I'm aiming for. So focusing more on what I'm best in is more what I wanted to do. And that's why I left the 747 Studios after 1.5 years or something. And went to Accenture. And now I'm a consultant for scaling content productions with CGI, with AI. Yeah. I'm part of the business development department over there.
Cool. Yeah, and I would love to talk more about the AI part also later. That sounds really interesting. And what you did at 747, it was already some years back. Now everyone is talking about, everyone's doing AI projects, but I think you were among the first ones to actually execute there. And that was really cool to see. And also with Accenture, if I can say so, I saw this case study that you guys did with using NVIDIA Omniverse and with Nestlé, right? Like for Nestlé.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share a bit more about that. I think there's some information out there about it already, but it would be great to just learn a little more. Like what did Nestlé want and what did you guys help them achieve?
Yeah, they worked with CGI or leveraged the technology some years ago, but they always had the challenges that there were multiple CGI vendors using CGI for creating images, but they never really made it on one DCC and render engine pipeline. And then NVIDIA Omniverse came into place. And with the Omniverse, we were able to produce kind of a production platform where through OpenUSD, all the different vendors were able to publish their digital twins or the digital twins they've created into the centralized production engine to automate the production of, in the first place, basic images. But now we're also leveraging digital twins for creating, in the Nestlé context, it's called advanced imageries. And now we're also looking into videos and see how we can use digital twins to also create videos or also to adapt content that is already existing and then using CGI and AI to adapt that to different market needs, bring them into different language classes and so on.
And if I may ask, because the term is new for me also, like when they say advanced imagery, what is that? What's like basic and what is advanced imagery?
Basic are those cutout or white studio images that you know from eCommerce or LP, and advanced images is then a product in context.
Okay. And that's where I can help a lot with making an advanced image, right? Giving it some context, putting it on a desk or on a beach or wherever.
And Nestle has so many different brands. Also, the quality expectation from the brands are quite different. There are some who just need an image, and there are others like Nespresso, for example, or Starbucks or whatever, who really have the expectation of high-end, super art-directed imageries. And there, it's not that easy with AI just to produce any kind of good-looking image, but then it should fit to the campaign look or the defined visual appearance of a brand and so on. That makes it a little bit more challenging, let's say.
Okay, cool. I would love to talk about that more later when we look at maybe, hey, also what's the future of 3D and CGI versus AI? How do they all play together, maybe or not? But then maybe just a step back. So if we look at CGI, what we need to create a nice rendering of a product is a digital twin of that product. And we talked about that recently in the podcast, basically trying to understand, okay, how can I get to a digital twin in the first place? We understood that there are often even multiple digital twins, but they're siloed, like in, let's say, product design or in engineering, or then in marketing, we have the problem that we're at the end of the pipeline, and we know that there is some kind of digital twin, but it's not in the form that we need it, and we don't have the expertise and the tooling to leverage it, etc. And then we basically outsource things to agencies. But just taking a step back, like looking at digital twins for design and marketing, you work quite a bit in the industry, right? And I think you saw the trend there and what happened the past 20 years, let's say, in the design departments. And there is this term I wanted to ask you about, which I recently learned. It's called sample-less production. So I have production without samples. And what does that mean for product design? What is the old way, basically, and why could it make sense to use a digital twin?
When I imagine, and this is already 6 years ago, 7 years ago or something, where we made our first steps in exactly what you mentioned, sampleless production for fashion at Otto, where we had the departments that were involved in the designing process for creating garments. And they were start using tools like Browseware and Clo3D and so on, but only for making sure that the patterns were created. And back in the days before they used Browseware or Clo, they did that manually. And then those patterns has been sent to China or wherever, Bangladesh, whatever, where the production location was. And there they did the first samples and then sent the stuff back to Germany. Then some changes has been done on those patterns, then sent them back to China or wherever. And this went back and forth for, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, whatever, until you had the final patterns on those patterns, then the final product has been created. And this process took 8, 12, 20 weeks or something. And then after the final product has been manufactured, created, they have been sent to Germany, and then you started with creating imageries. So this process took 24 weeks, 30 weeks or whatever. And now when you're doing everything digitally, you can start creating the marketing material, the imageries, the videos, in that moment when you make your design decision and say, okay, this is the way how the shirt, the hoodie, whatever should look like. And then you can immediately start creating imageries and also start selling your product on your website platform or whatever. Probably the delivery time is a little bit longer, but in that moment, when the container arrives in Europe, you already have sold everything that has been produced, and which makes time to market incredibly faster.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, in other words, because you are designing in 3D, you can start, selling, like you said, before you even have the physical product.
Exactly.
But also, and I think that's what you just said, is basically during the design phase, all these design iterations, I can shorten that drastically by just doing digitally, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, this example, it makes sense. So what they were doing before, if I get it correct, is really you have a sewing pattern and you don't sew it in Germany, which is like another topic, right? But then you send that to the factory, which is far away, and maybe like then by ship you get delivered the garment where they basically sew it together. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can understand how that can take long and is expensive and not good for the environment either. Okay, that's during the design phase, but you also said then for marketing purposes, so sample-less production. The opposite of that would be basically production where you have a physical sample. So let's say for photography, right? So you take pictures of an object to market it. But then when you use a digital twin, I think there's even like a mixed form, right? Where you have a CAD model or so, or you have something, but it's not final. And then you still send either pictures of the real thing or the real thing, right? And like people model it.
Yeah, true. But the great thing about that is that those images doesn't need to look super glossy finalized. You can do that wherever in the
Right.
world with a cell phone, in a storage or whatever, or within the production assembly, or yeah, it doesn't make really sense. It's just for the artist to have some kind of visual reference and to see how probably details or things that are not integrated in the CAD files look
Hmm.
like, or are, yeah, just as a reference, which makes it like way
Right.
more easy to produce those images.
And you still don't send a physical sample then.
No,
You just
you
send a
don't. You
picture.
don't.
So that makes sense.
Exactly. But nevertheless, when it comes to other products where you have the separation between, let's say, the geometry in CG,
Hmm.
the geometry and the label on top, which makes it quite difficult as well, because those different pillars are most of the time in different board pillars, because on the one hand you have the design phase of the labels, and then you have the marketing pillar where they need the CAD files. But to create a digital twin, you need both, right? The CAD files for
Hmm.
the geometry and the label files for the printing that comes
Wow.
on
Yes.
top
Yeah.
of the geometry. And that makes it hard, because then you normally would need the printing in a certain standardized way, following some production standards that you've defined. And you don't get them because those people are at the beginning in the design phase. So this is quite challenging also to get them in the right way and at the right time to be able to then, for marketing purposes, automate production and get the images you need.
That makes so much sense. So basically, there's still a lot of work to be done when you want to create a digital twin, especially when you have not been able to maintain it throughout the pipeline, right? From the
Yeah.
design phase, which might be different in fashion, where you basically always look at the
Yeah.
materials, but right. But then when I don't know, produce a speaker or something like that, something that has a CAD model and then it has
Water
some
bottle.
materials, the water bottle. Yeah, there's no digital twin throughout the pipeline, right? Like,
Yeah.
but then, okay, let's assume we get there, and there are ways to get there, right? And like people investigate so many different approaches, and yeah, like often they work through agencies, but often they work through in-house, use 3D scanning, material scanning, and so on. So when you have your digital twin, then there's this trend that I think you mentioned at some point is we see more and more enterprises leverage 3D also for content adaptation and localization. So basically not just having one version of a product and rendering it as is, how it would be with a photo, but actually doing more. And that is the really exciting part where 3D can actually play out its strength. So we spend a lot of time creating that 3D twin, but then what do we get out of it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There are so many brands or so many enterprises having a ton of images or videos laying in their DOM, and they would love to leverage that for different use cases, for different countries, for different markets, but they're not able because, for example, the label is in the wrong language, for example. And therefore, it's super interesting to take a deeper look on how can we create systems that are able to exchange the product in those images or videos for different language clusters, for example, or different flavors, because there's a different flavor in the Mexican market, for example. And that's super interesting. How to organize the production that those things can leverage, but also very challenging to find
Cool.
solutions that enables that.
I can see that. It's very advanced. We were basically saying like the industry overall is still trying to figure out step one, which is how to get that digital twin. But then step
Yeah,
two, of course, still takes more effort, but it's quite encouraging to see that there are so many options what you can do when you are able to dynamically adapt content based on a digital twin. I heard this term once about CAD. So I'm not a CAD engineer, but I know that there is this term of living CAD models versus dead CAD models. Maybe it's a
hmm
little bit like that with digital twins. Twin dead because it doesn't know that it has this label on it. It's just all
yeah,
baked into a single texture atlas, whatever. Or is it like a living digital twin where you can actually use it to customize your content real quick and localize it, adapt it, and then generate millions of images and
yeah.
variations with the help of a 3D model?
And there, what we're talking about now is just the appearance, the visual appearance of a product. but not functionality. Right? Think about the functionality comes into place where you have to make sure that the digital twin is movable, but only in the right way. And then you probably have dependencies between different objects within that product, that if you move one part, the other moves as well to a certain degree, and so on. That is, yeah, there's still a lot to explore for us within the next years. Yeah.
Is that maybe why sofas are such a popular thing to be done with CGI? Because you have so many options. I don't know, I want to have the 3-seater, the 2-seater, and then with the ottoman or not, and like backrests, headrest or not, or that may be one reason. Because they're so
Yeah.
modular that you can impossibly do this all with photography so easily.
Yeah, and it's quite expensive to get them or to produce them in the first place. When you think about having a collection of a sofa series, and as you mentioned, it's available as a 1-seater, 2-seater, 3-seater on the left side, and so on. And this with multiple materials, and you have to produce every of those sofas, ship them into the photo studio to make an image. This is, yeah, quite expensive, and therefore it makes completely sense to do that in CG.
Interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned basically also the life cycle value of one product. I guess if you have a lot of small products, it's worth less than if you have one big product like a sofa. Yeah. Pays off more quickly. Cool.
Yeah.
And so then looking a bit more at the AI world, you mentioned some work at Accenture already around what you do with Nestlé there, for example. But then are there also other use cases where CGI and AI somehow are interconnected, play together?
Yeah, there are, because until now, it's often the case when you use AI to create an image that involves a product, that certain parts or even typography of the product will not be displayed in a correct manner. So the AI is hallucinating in a way and is changing those parts of things. And there it makes sense to have a combination of CGI digital twins and AI to leverage best of both worlds, because then you can make sure that you have the creative freedom of using AI, but in combination with the rendering of a digital twin that makes sure that the product looks correct and in the right way. And this is like a feasible way to have best of both worlds.
Right. I think that makes perfect sense. And we talked about that even in the last episode here on the show. So basically, if I get it correctly, using CGI for highly precise representations of your product, we basically also have a built-in QA mechanism, right? You know that the model looks good, and then you know that the renderings will look accurate. Like the renderer, a classical renderer will never hallucinate anything into your product, right?
No.
We know that we're comfortable with that. So we're comfortable automating the rendering. But then, like the AI, the other topic is what would that even be needed for if you're having a new product? So let's move back to sample-less production. I'm designing a new product. Why would I have generative AI? Like, why would it even be able to generate pictures of that? That doesn't make sense. It's designed in 3D, unless the AI does my whole CAD, and that's another story. But at least where we are right now,
Yeah. And also you want to have the product consistent through different touch points and different marketing materials. It should always look the same and doesn't vary it in a certain way.
Yeah, so basically you get that accuracy, and I get that this is needed because you want to avoid returns where people send back the product. And that's always super expensive, right? Like when you get returns.
There are different kind of products, right? If you think about having a car or a sofa or a can of tuna, you want to have the sofa and the car probably to look correct. But when you talk about a can of tuna, then it's probably more the tuna that you're interested in and not the can, and therefore it doesn't really make a difference if it looks correct or not. It's just the image is just a vehicle to transport the information that it's about tuna and not salmon, for example.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great example. The car is so different, not in terms of price only, but maybe we can find another example that costs a bit less. But I don't know, let's say a watch or something. Sofa, sneaker, exactly. The sneakers, they have a huge aesthetic value, right? Of course, We need to have something on our feet usually that we don't catch a cold or whatever, or run into a broken glass and then hurt ourselves. But apart from this functional part, I think footwear is a highly visual, like fashion product, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's super important that we get the details right and the aesthetics. And if in contrary, if they're not right, people will say this doesn't do the job that it's supposed to do. It's supposed to look good. It doesn't have the exact color I wanted. I'm sending it back. I don't like this color. It's too pinkish or too orangey for me or whatever. This can happen. But with the tuna, it's more, yeah, whatever. If the box online looked like it was a white can and now it's actually like a tin can,
Doesn't
whatever.
matter.
If it's still tuna and it still costs the same and it's still the same amount inside and it tastes good, then whatever. I'll put the can away anyway. So yeah, like CPG versus anything that has an aesthetic value, that's already a huge difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That was super insightful already. But then it gives us a little bit more of an angle, right? Where AI can also be a little more aggressive, let's say, with generating things versus where we need to be a little more careful and rely more on the digital twins and the accuracy. But then for AI in general, maybe last question, just thinking about the future, we're hearing a lot about AI bubble right now. People are questioning the projections from Sam Altman when it comes to OpenAI's business. And like we see that there's more and more like a cool down that we can see on the horizon at least. I think everyone says AI is here to stay. Sure, no question. But is there still some kind of bubble? Is there some kind of hangover that you can see coming? Or how do you see AI in the future, especially in CGI and like these kind of contexts?
You mentioned this like a minute ago, that the AI normally doesn't have any clue of how the CAD model looks. Imagine you would be able to ingest a CAD model into an AI, a CAD model into an AI model, and then the AI model knows exactly how the product looks like and how materials behave in terms of light, shadows, reflections, and so on. And with that, you would be able to create more or less anything content-wise with that model. We're going that direction with LoRa's and so on. But yeah, it's not finally there. And we're still seeing improvements in so many different ways with AI that I'm pretty sure that we're not final there. We will, like within the next years, still see a lot of large improvements on how AI will help us create content. When you take a look on real video production for larger brands, like we do for automotive industry, for example, we're still not there that we really are able to use AI for creating those videos because we're not able to adjust it in a way that we want. Then the client has some corrections and we're not able to really adjust those corrections like the client is used to. And I'm pretty sure there are some startings, like we have control nets and all those things that makes it easier to adjust or control the content that is created, but I'm pretty sure we're still not there where we're going to be in the future. And there it's super interesting what will come next. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm also quite excited to see where everything's heading. I think we're understanding a lot more than we understood like a couple of years ago about how like CGI and AI work together and will maybe work together for like very long. And
But in the
yeah,
end, when I was working at 747 Studios and AI entered the game, there were some photographers who really went crazy because they thought in half a year, I do not have a job anymore because they saw all those fancy, good-looking images that has been created by 13 years old using AI. But there's still photo studios out there. There are still CG agencies creating imageries, and I'm pretty sure that will stay also for the next 10 years. Maybe
totally.
not in a way that like it has been before, but at the end, it's just another tool that we have in our toolbox, right? Next to photography and CGI and whatever.
That's a really great and I think very true statement. So would that last question, would that really also imply that when you're a 3D artist and you're running a studio, when you learn AI tools right now, is that something you'd recommend to basically stay up to date and just stay relevant? And then, as you said, just have another tool in your toolbox and then do that for the next decades?
Yeah, because you can shortcut ways, right? When you normally would create a whole environment in CG that took you, I don't know, 5 days or whatever, and now you can shortcut that, and now it takes you half a day or even shorter, then it's always good to know how to handle those things.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. And just coming from an education background where I learned programming and having the same topic being discussed. Hey, do we still need to learn programming? Oh, AI is going to replace all the programmers. Yeah, not exactly, right?
Probably
You
not
gotta have
tomorrow.
it's the context knowledge that makes it valuable, right? If you know
Yeah.
what you're looking for to create good images, you know what a good image can look like, you know how lighting works and these kind of things, then you're a much better AI artist than
Yeah, absolutely.
the average John Doe, right?
Yeah. And you learn those things in reality best, even in a studio or on set, and not in CG or in AI.
So the old school way is a photographer, basically.
Yeah.
That's also a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much, Toby, for a really insightful and very pleasant, exciting conversation. Looking forward
Thank you very
to
much.
staying in touch, yeah, and seeing what you guys are up to at Accenture.
Cool. Thanks, Max.